Wow, tough gig coming after Thibault. You've all got your tissues back in your pockets, and I'll do my best. But Dean Mihov, Dean Mair, Thibault, Segure, faculty, staff, distinguished guests, parents and partners. Yes. Parents and partners, the often forgotten power behind the throne, the engine room driving the ship of state. Betcha you had no idea what this whole INSEAD thing was before they signed up, huh? So give yourselves a big round of applause. Well deserved. But most importantly, dare I say, you. INSEAD's Masters of Management class of 2022. Congratulations, you did it! Woo. I am truly honored and humbled to be with you today to celebrate your remarkable achievement, individually and collectively. Because above all, this is your day, your big, big day. Not only did you survive and thrive this intense program at the world's best business school, but look at all the crap you had to swim through to get here. A war in Europe, global supply chain disruptions, and pandemics, of course. But remember what that really meant for you. Navigating border closures, masks on or off, Zooms, PCRs, ARTs, canceled trips to China and canceled vacations, quarantine and isolation. And yet, here you are. You did it with a smile on your face, mostly, a bounce in your step, and all the while embracing and immersing yourself in this slightly quirky community that is INSEAD. And again, not just survived, but thrived. The rest of the world went into lockdown. They relied on mainlining the narcotic of Netflix to make it through these past 2 years. But you said, screw this pandemic stuff, I'm going to take a master's. And look at Giving Day, as Urs mentioned, and Thibault. As an alum, I was particularly impressed, impressed, to see that you were the first class ever to reach 100% participation. Of course, this just so happened to be the year when my class finally got their act together. And we went from a lowly 8% last year, soaring to the top of all the MBA classes this year, only to see you come out of nowhere with every single one of you contributing. We tip our hat to you. And of course, your class is the first to single-handedly establish INSEAD's new 5th campus in Glasgow, of all places. Or is it the Glasgow bar? Judging by all those impressive drinks tabs we've heard all about, it would certainly get us a long way to a groundbreaking ceremony. An impressive class on all fronts. Well done. So I guess by now you know the routine of what's supposed to happen here. You sit quietly back while I force feed you pearls of wisdom that I've gained for every one of my gray hairs grown and lost along the way, handing you some sort of ready-made prescription on how to be a fantastic success in your life after INSEAD. Or come down from the mount with engraved tablets of sage do's and don'ts that you'll remember for the rest of time. Ha! As if. What the hell do I know about what you'll be facing in the next 18 months, let alone the next 18 years? In fact, When Ilian and his team first approached me to consider celebrating with you today, I thought they were joking. I haven't launched a unicorn. I'm not a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. I haven't developed an easy solution for global warming, and I'm not a huge hit on TikTok yet. And I also don't believe anyone can give you a one-size-fits-all roadmap for the next 30-odd years of your life. With apologies to all those previous commencement speakers who have tried far more eloquently than I. As an aside, the advice we received when my class graduated from law school was pick and stick. Pick a good law firm, work your way up to partner, and stick with it. They'll look after you for the rest of your life. Yeah. Within a year of graduation, the stock market wipeout meant that close to a third of our class was out on their butts, many never to practice law again. We know now that the average person will change jobs 12 times in their lifetime. But hey, you're INSEADers. What's the big problem with that stat? It's retrospective. It's already out of date by the time the numbers are crunched. It means next to nothing about what's going to happen to you. So, a little pleased with myself for having talked my way out of the gig, a reply popped into my inbox. But that's the point. You've always run your own race, followed your own path, been guided by your own compass of success. Our MIMs are special. There is no defined path for them. They'll make their own way according to their own rules. You'll be great. Got me there. Flattery was starting to gain traction. So here I am. And I've established what I'm not going to do, but now what? Well, in speaking to some of your colleagues and reflecting on what might have resonated with me in my commencement, there are two main themes that came through loud and clear. How to deal with disruption to you personally, and how to continue to try to make a difference in everything you do, even or especially as life intervenes. So to that end, I'd like to share with you three brief stories from my life where I found myself at an inflection point, and how embracing them, with considerable help from a secret weapon, took me on totally unplanned but far more exciting paths, and allowed me to do some good along the way. But before I do that, I need to set the scene with a little audience participation. Now, MIMs, on your feet, please. This will be a little chaotic, but you'll figure it out. Now, MIMs, when I say go, turn to your classmates on your right, left, behind, and in front, and give each other high fives or socially distant fist bumps, and have a good look into each other's eyes when you do so. Got it? Okay, 3, 2, 1. You got this! Woohoo! Excellent! Okay. Thank you. Well done. You can settle back in, and that was, by the way, your last required class participation event of your MIM career. Well done. Now, I want you to remember those high fives, those faces, those fists. For if there is anything that holds constant with any graduating class from INSEAD, the bonds that you have formed over the past year will endure for the rest of your lives. These are the people with whom you will share your most joyous moments and your moments of despair. From your wedding or weddings, to births, to separations, otherwise known as matches, hatches, and dispatches, holidays, new jobs, new companies, and new beginnings. Long after you've forgotten why ROIC is better than EBITDA, or whether the 4 Ps are still relevant, or whether cash is still king, these are the people that will be with you throughout thick and thin, through tears and fears and cheers. You are each other's secret weapon. As we all learn at INSEAD, you can't do this alone. Being open to each other and each other's ideas means you'll end up in a better place, with better ideas and better outcomes. And now, as you're warmly welcomed into the broader INSEAD community, the secret weapon, that secret weapon, has become infinitely more valuable. Because as your network of 130 grows to encompass INSEAD's entire alumni community of more than 67,000, all celebrating the INSEAD experience, all eager to support one another, and all sharing the unique DNA. Now, on to disruptions and doing good. Number 1, be bold. So I've alluded earlier to my initial baby steps to becoming Rumpole of the Bailey or Perry Mason, which were stopped in their tracks before I even got started. But that was okay, because while I loved the justice part of law and making a difference for an aggrieved party or upholding the system, I wasn't really all that keen on the posturing and administrative bits that came along with it. Through a great deal of luck and an even greater deal of persistence, I ended up, as it was said, being appointed as a political advisor to a Canadian cabinet minister. Amazing job. At the center of the action, making a real difference, all the while contributing to your country and your community. Think West Wing, but with bad 90s haircuts and parkas. At the same time, though, my mother was gravely ill. One of the worst things you'll face in life, if you haven't already, is the death of a parent. I'm told the only thing worse is the death of a child or a partner. So while I was an absolute wreck inside, I vowed that I would turn the tragic loss of my mom into a tangible, lasting legacy for her. She passed away from a lifetime of tobacco use. Now, it just so happened that the minister I was working for in Canada was the Minister for Health. And it also just so happened that the government had a long-stalled legislative agenda to introduce restrictions to try to prevent young people from starting to use tobacco in the first place. I decided to be bold. Some would say audacious. Others said deluded. I'll go with bold. I volunteered to take it on. We put together a coalition of supportive government and opposition MPs, health groups, medical professionals, community organizations from across the country, all making the case for change. Eventually, the Prime Minister and Cabinet approved the package, and it was introduced on the floor of the House of Commons for a vote. All was going swimmingly until some opposition MPs introduced amendments to add extra provisions to the package. For a whole bunch of technical reasons, this would effectively mean that the vote on the package would not take place that day and may never have made it back to the House for a vote again. So we mustered our troops of volunteers and health professionals who, within an hour, managed to convince the opposition parties to withdraw their amendments. The vote took place and passed easily. The result was the most comprehensive package of measures aimed at preventing young people from smoking in the history of the country. We banned vending machines. We introduced dramatic health warnings on packages, and the age of purchase was raised to 18 across the country. While a tremendous feat, it could never replace the loss of my mother, but did allow me to attach some meaning to it and that it wasn't all in vain. But my point here isn't to talk about legislative agendas or personal loss. It's this. I found myself in a personally confronting situation, a life-changing event. Saw that I was in a position where I could make a difference by boldly taking action. But that action would lead nowhere on my own. We gathered the best and the brightest that the Canadian health system had to offer, made the case, overcame objections, and came up with a far more comprehensive, far more impactful solution that would lead to far better outcomes. So be bold, but do so by gathering the brightest and most energetic minds you can find around you. Oh, and there's a direct connection to INSEAD too. It was this particular career highlight that really resonated with the admissions committee and led to an offer to attend this great place. Number 2, be curious. So off I go to INSEAD, without doubt one of the best years of my life up to that point. Learned that I had a lot to learn and did my best to fill in the gaps. In between National Day parties, weekend trips to European capitals, and delving into the finer points of the prisoner's dilemma, and no, not from the parties or trips, by the way, I actually managed to find a job with an international strategy consulting firm. Sound familiar? In Sydney, Australia. You beaut! Now, this is the first time that I truly appreciated the power of the INSEAD community. There were a couple of us from the class headed down, but apart from that, I didn't know a soul. So I started attending INSEAD events, sidling up to INSEAD barbecues, and before I knew it, I was happily ensconced in Australia with a solid background of the ins and outs of Aussie culture and a great support group of friends. Dateline Sydney, living the Aussie dream. Good job? Check. Hard work, but weekends were always free. Sun, surf, scenery? Check. Amazing wine? Check. And as I said, a great group of friends? Check. At some stage during my second year in Oz, a bunch of us were headed to the iconic Bondi Beach for a long, languorous lunch of sun, seafood, and Shiraz. But we never arrived. Along the way, a taxi decided to run a red light, smashed into us, totaling the car. 2 of us were badly injured, me, unfortunately, the worst. It led to long-term disability leave from work and 6 months of rehab, but I won't bore you with those details. Because during my recovery, those new INSEAD friends were there all along the way. And when I was starting to get bored and looking for something a little more intellectually stimulating than lifting weights or doing stretches, one of those friends came to me with an interesting proposition. How would you like to write a book? Now, for those of you following along at home, hint, inflection point. Yeah, he said, my friend's a publisher, and she's looking for someone who can work with 2 prominent CEOs and tell their story. Of course, I'd never written a book, didn't really know what was involved, and doubted that I could do it anyway. But the more I thought about it and dug into it, the more curious I became. The 2 CEOs in question were both Americans. They both moved to Australia at around the same time, just as Australian business was really opening up to the world. And they both took on the top jobs at 2 of the most iconic businesses in the region. Telstra, the monopoly-owned telco still partly owned by the government, and Westpac, one of the big 4 banks, previously state-owned, that was still reeling from a series of scandals that nearly broke the bank, literally. These 2 Americans, transplanted to the land down under without so much as a jar of Vegemite to ease their transition, both transformed these struggling behemoths into agile, responsive powerhouses fighting fit for the 21st century. How did they manage to accomplish all that? And with all the baggage that comes with being a foreigner in Australia. My curiosity got the better of me. I left my consulting job, and for 9 months, I sat at the feet of these gurus and learned what they did, what worked, what didn't, and what others could learn from their experiences. I'd bounce what I was learning off my friends to clarify, chop, and change. And at the end of those 9 months, we had a book. We published it in 1999, and it went on to become the best-selling business book in Australia, and it was the best post-MBA training anyone has gotten anywhere. Okay, the car accident was crappy, and yes, I was lucky it wasn't worse, but by being curious, how did they do this? And how do you write a book? Lemons can be transformed into lemonade. All with the help of our secret weapon, our fellow insiders along the way. So don't settle. Be curious. Keep looking for new ways to learn. You'll soon find where you belong. And number 3, be kind. That book led to starting a consulting firm with a group of partners, something I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have had the guts to do previously. Our clients were primarily large Australasian companies and MNCs, but we always carved out some of our consultants' time and resources to contribute to good causes. I have to say that long before the days of ESG, even before triple bottom line, it wasn't exactly central to what we were doing, and we measured that contribution more in terms of time given than real impact made. The road to that changing for our company, and to a much greater extent me personally, happened early one morning in July 2008. I'd just become president of the Alumni Association in Australia and New Zealand, and between that and our growing practice, things were pretty full on. We were working with a listed company finalizing their financial results, and part of my job was to file the finalized documents with the stock exchange. Once we received the green light, I started to put together that package to be uploaded. Then something strange happened. My brain was telling my fingers what to type, but they weren't doing it. Colleagues asked, "What's wrong?" And I couldn't speak. Somebody grabbed my phone, who called my doctor, and before I knew it, I was in emergency. Tests, scans, EEGs, ECGs, and eventually in came the specialists. They told me I had a brain tumor. That sure as hell wasn't in the plan. The doctors told me that while it was most likely operable, it would be palliative at best, as 5-year outcomes were pretty grim. But hey, spoiler alert, I'm still here. Now, this is about the only thing I would ever deign to say I have in common with Steve Jobs. I had to deal with that diagnosis all day, preparing to tell my family and friends, and preparing to say my goodbyes, just as he did with his first pancreatic cancer diagnosis. And as with Steve Jobs, at the end of that endless, everything in slow motion day, I had a biopsy. When the results came back, I can't say that my doctors were crying as Jobs said his did, but I sure was. It turned out to be a very rare form of tumor mainly found in children and was completely curable by surgery. I had the operation, and now I'm fine. But this type of inflection point changes you. Staring your own mortality in the face means you view things, everything, through a different lens. How is what I'm doing today making a difference? How am I helping to change lives, to help others, to follow my purpose in life, my obligations as a human being rather than just adding to the bottom line, to feel good by doing good? Soon after my recovery, an opportunity presented itself. A friend of mine was one of Sydney's leading lawyers, and he had a degenerative disease that left him confined to a wheelchair. He was telling a group of us, many insiders of course, about the dire state of accessible public transport in Sydney, particularly taxis. Sydney's taxis weren't like London's. For the most part, they were sedans. Accessible taxis were even worse. They were modified station wagons or estate cars, where the passenger would sit in a giant bubble in the back, cut off from fellow passengers and no air conditioning in Sydney. And the taxi industry wasn't interested in fixing this situation. Taxi medallions were a license to print money with little or no investment required. Turns out, though, the government had a bunch of cut-rate medallions on the shelf for accessible taxis that they couldn't even give away. Now, we immediately saw that here was a great way to make a real impact. Gathering together transport experts, investment banks, and community groups representing the disability sector, among others, our small band of merry warriors convinced the government to allow us to create an entire disability taxi network from scratch within 12 months that would make money for taxi drivers and the network, all the while providing a critical service. What they wouldn't let us do was allow us to alter the way taxis were booked. That would take another band of upstarts a few years later, called Uber. But as the key drivers of the initiative, we made some money, but most importantly, we did well by doing good. Business, yes, but importantly, business as a force for good. Our desire to help, to be kind and compassionate to a friend, ended with a real, lasting change that is still making a difference. Something that at the end of each day I could say, yep, today we done good. Looking back from your momentous day today, I think it's fair to say that for many of you, your main job in life has been to learn. School, then undergrad, and now a master's at INSEAD. Now you're being cast off, where the only marks that matter are the ones you give yourself. But if you deal with those unplanned disruptions that we all inevitably face, if you continue to question how you can continue to contribute, to do well as doing good, by remembering to be bold, be curious, and be kind, you'll mark yourself at the far end of the bell curve far more often than not. And in life, that's a pretty darn good place to be. And finally, back to that secret weapon. It doesn't seem right to give a commencement address without quoting someone from somewhere who had something to say about something that can serve as inspiration for us all. And so in looking for the best of BOMO, I turned to perhaps one of the most famous academics of all time, and I guarantee you've all read some of his works. Dr. Seuss. His words seem particularly appropriate to remind us all of the power of the bonds that you've forged over the past year and the alumni community you're about to join. As Dr. Seuss said, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. I see before me an amazing group of caring, curious, and bold individuals. Today has shown me that we can all rest a little easier, that when it comes time for the torch to be passed, you will hold it high. Not just as successful individuals, not just as fine representatives of INSEAD, not merely as impressive business women and men, but as trusted custodians of the cause, that business truly can be a force for good in this world. Congratulations, thank you, and bon courage.